Alright, so this time I got one of the V6, Dyson V6 cleaner heads in here, and I'm going to be servicing it, so I figured this would be a good one because it's kind of nasty. This would be a good one to show everyone how to do this. So follow along if you're interested in servicing your V6 neck cleaner head assembly. So first thing we're going to do is take the brush out. So we're just going to pop that off, and then you can just wiggle this and you can actually pop this off, and then I'll wash this part, and then what I do is cut all this hair off, and then I blow all this out with compressed air, and there's a bearing right there, and you don't really want to get that wet. If you do, you want to make sure you dry it immediately. So I wash this downward, so I scrub it really good and make sure that I don't get any water in here. And you can even tape this if you wanted to, but it can still get wet from inside this side, so if you were to tape it, it's just so that water doesn't drip into here. So anyway, so next you want to take your bottom plate off here, and so you can take that off and wash that. Okay, so now you're going to start taking your screws out. Here you have your Torque 8 T8 screws, Torque's size 8, and I'm just going to use the my driver to take this out real quick. You got 3 in the top, or in the front, and you got 5 back here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 small one right where that notch is. It's kind of hard to see, but that notch is there because there's a screw right down there. And once you get those screws out, and this has a junk in it. Once you get those screws out, then that's going to release this cover piece here. And this piece is a bit delicate, but you kind of have to almost flatten it a little bit as you're pulling it out. See how it flexes? So got to be a little careful, kind of gentle with that piece. Alright, so once you have that piece off, now you can actually lift the clear section off. Go ahead and pull this wiring. Okay, and this part here is a little bit tricky. So you kind of have to like bend it slightly like this as you're pulling and lifting up. So, and that just pops out. So, and then your motor here is installed right here, so in this piece you can wash. And what I do is always try to make a mark on my motor. So I know which way is up, and then when I pull it out, it's just a little easier for me to reference that mark. I usually have a marker that I put on there, but I don't have the marker with me. And there is some hair and stuff down in here. One thing that I see happen from time to time is this bearing right here will get wet, and it will actually seize up. So if you have a V6 where this nozzle, this bearing is seizing up, depends on how seized it is and how bad it is, but if it's got wet, then it's probably rusted. All the grease is dried out in there, and you can actually pull this bearing seal from this position and clean it out with like a WD-40 or something like that. Blow it out really good with a compressor with compressed air, and then re-lubricate it all with that bearing seal just pulled off. So to disassemble it even further is quite time consuming. So I just do it that way because otherwise you have to pull all of this motor out. It's a huge process. All right, we're back. So now we're going to go through putting this all back together correctly. This is the hardest part. So follow along, and hopefully you can get yours put back together right. Okay, so you see my mark here. I marked the top. I don't know if you can see my little mark. Mark the top so I know this is my orientation. It's going straight up. This is going to pop right in here. And you can kind of see where the wires are going to go. There's a little notch right down inside of there. Okay, now what you want to do is you can see how when this is just hanging on its own weight, it wants to sag a little bit, and see how this gap gets closed up if I lift this. So you want to lift this up while you're placing this clear nozzle back on. And go ahead and make sure you get your gasket put back in there. I did that off camera. Just for the sake of time. So as you're lifting this up to close this gap right here, you're going to slide your clear plate over, and then watch where your wires are going and get that set down in there. And then you can see how the we're going to set this motor in place here, and we're going to do a little trick here to get this clear piece back on. I'm just taking a small little bit of lubricant, or I'm just using, in this case, I'm just using a little bit of Vaseline, and it makes this this part go a little bit easier. So what you have to do is you have to pop this piece back. You have to first feed this part in here at the top, and then as you're doing that, you're going to kind of hinge it together, and then it just pops together. So this piece is kind of nestled right down into this groove, so that's where it swivels there. Okay, once you've done that, you then want to this little wire piece will press in there. But first I'm going to get this set in place. So what you want to do is you want to lift this motor up. This motor wants to kind of sag, and you see how there's a gap right here. So you want to close that gap as you're setting this clear nozzle over top back in place. And then watch your wires. Your wires want to be routed right down around there. Okay, and then set your wiring in place there. And that just kind of does a little twist, and this fits down in there like that. And then you're going to route your wires down here. You can do this with I find it easiest to do it with a small little flat blade screwdriver, and just push gently. Since it's kind of thin gauge wiring, you don't want to gouge the wire, obviously. So just gently work that wire down into the grooves there, and that keeps that wire routed in the right place so it's not in the way when you're assembling the rest of it. I will give Dyson credit that they do tend to do a good job with their wire routing. Okay, so we're good there. So as this turns, you can see that wire has some room to move. So now we're going to get our cover, and this cover piece here, what it does is you have to kind of almost flatten it a little bit, not all the way flat. So you got to start getting this little notch in. And honestly, if that breaks off, it's not the end of the world. So you're going to start by leading that piece in first. And this part's probably the trickiest part. And it always goes a lot smoother when I'm doing this off camera. When I'm doing it on camera, it's always more difficult for some reason. That's how things go. So once you get this in place, you get it all lined up. Make sure your gaps, you don't have major gaps. Make sure this spins smoothly. Okay. Then we'll flip it over. And now remember, you have your one small screw that goes all the way down in there. And luckily my bit is magnetic, so I can hang on to it. If it's not, you can either hold a magnet to your bit, and that will give your bit some level of hold for the screw. That's a little trick. Helps. So go ahead and get your screws put in.
I'm going to use the gun to get them started, and then I'm going to hand tighten them. Let's just get them in.
Okay, then hand tighten all these screws down.
Don't over torque them.
Okay, then go ahead and install your brush roll. You can put your end cap back on, that just pushes on. And lock that in place. And then put your other plate on, and you're all set. And I take a rag with some denatured alcohol to wipe off any paint scuff, so it looks almost brand new when we're done. Okay, hope it helps. Hope it helped, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And I'll see you next time. Bye.